Baltimore Ravens podcast, where we talk everything and anything Baltimore Ravens football. Thank you for tuning in, of course, on all of your favorite platforms, especially Overcast. And I'm joined by a special guest here today from Fantasy Life. We welcome in Paul Charchian.
Hey, great to talk to you, Josh. And I should give a shout out to my guy, Baltimore legend, Kirk McEwen on 98 Rock. I don't know if you know this, but I've been doing the Ravens pregame show for 15 years with Kirk and now Keith Mills and Val, and yeah, so those are my peeps right there. And so excited to be talking to Baltimore Ravens fans again in advance of our first preseason game.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you certainly are very familiar with the local content and everything Baltimore Ravens when it comes to, and you mentioned 90 Rock and Kurt and the gang, and Keith Mills. What a legend here in the
Yeah,
Baltimore market. So
no kidding,
he's
no
certainly been
kidding.
around for quite a while. So I'm glad that you get a chance to work with the likes of those folks.
Yeah, they're great guys, and Kirk's so funny. We have a ton of fun, and we get to talk. We get to talk a little fantasy football before every game, which is great, and it
Yeah.
helps that your team is highly relevant in fantasy football thanks to players like Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers, and I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about a lot of the fantasy impact those players are going to have here. Josh, I'm excited.
Absolutely, and we, speaking of the Ravens and fantasy, it wasn't always the case. I think going back, and I've been playing fantasy for quite a while, right? And I'm a young guy, and you know, given the landscape of what the Ravens offense was, you would maybe find one or two Ravens. I think back in the day, it was kind of like it was just like the Ravens defense and the Ravens kicker drafted. Like that's it. Like it wasn't like maybe you had Todd Heap and maybe you had a skill player or two, but it was kind of like the receivers were garbage. Like you weren't drafting any Ravens receivers. Back in the
Yeah,
Kyle Buller days, you weren't drafting a quarterback of the Ravens. Obviously, Joe Flacco was on a lot of fantasy rosters and the tight ends like Dennis Pitta and the likes of those folks. But the running backs were a revolving door. And I'm sure you can pinpoint to the skill positions, but as recently with the Lamar Jackson era and the weapons around him in this roster, you can make an argument that 2025 Ravens roster is probably the best on paper. I know they're not paper champions, and this isn't done on paper as far as a competition, but Paul, the Ravens roster is made up of some nice veterans here. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins brought in the back end of his career, but you have a healthy draft class that has been groomed for the last few years. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman getting yet another extension this offseason. And then
yeah.
the addition of Derrick Henry, who, for one, for myself, has turned back the clock. I mean,
Hmm.
the guy is on the other side of 30, and for running backs, that's considered old. Now he's like 6, 7 years younger than myself, but for the mileage that it carries, but for the beast of a runner that he is, last year was a career year for him and a renaissance and a resurgence, coming out of nowhere and almost having amassed 2,000 yards. And if it wasn't Sir Saquon's amazing year on the ground, Henry was the runner that last year. But before we get to all that, because there's a lot to unpack with the Ravens in fantasy this year and fantasy overall, but I want to touch on a couple things coming out of camp already. Camp hasn't already been kind to the Baltimore Ravens. Isaiah Likely already coming down with a foot fracture. And then apparently Zay Flowers being banged up with a leg injury that's considered day to day. I heard Harbaugh talk about that. It could be a few days, but as we know here, a few days always turns into a week to a month to whatever. And it happened with Shrod Bateman early in his career where you're like, come on, guys. So what do you think the makeup of the impact already this early that, with the likes of Likely and Flowers already banged up early for this Ravens roster?
Well, yeah, let's start with Likely. And by the way, it's just a quick side note because you mentioned Todd Heap. My podcast, my fantasy podcast is called Fantasy Football Weekly. We go all the way back to when Todd Heap was playing, and we named our injury report the Todd Heap Memorial Injury Report because he was on it every week. Every week we were talking about Todd Heap. And longtime Raven fans, you'll remember the dude, he was a good player, constantly hurt. Felt bad for Todd Heap, an otherwise really good career. And while we're talking about tight end injuries, Isaiah Likely. So he's going to have surgery. If he didn't already, he may have already had the surgery. This is expected to knock him out the entire preseason. Could be ready week 1, but we don't know for sure. This puts a little bit more energy and a little more confident in Mark Andrews, because I was nervous. In the offseason, when the team talked about Mark Andrews and just said, well, maybe he'll be here, maybe he won't be here. It's like, man, that is not a vote of confidence that you want to have for your player. But, Andrews, there was never apparently any real move to get Andrews out of town. And Andrews, of course, was, after that incredibly slow start last year, Andrews was a great, consistent fantasy producer, all the touchdowns. He hurt people in that first month of the season, but at the end of the day, he ended up being great. And now, with likely to miss the whole preseason, you figure Mark Andrews is going to roll into week 1, getting the majority of the work, and you feel a little bit more confident about him. I've got him right now as tight end 10.
I was going to ask you, okay, so your ranking right now is tight end 10. Okay, so he's just right there at the tail end of the top 10. I also had him on my board in the top 10 in tight ends, and obviously Likely was in somewhere in that top 20 conversation. Because he's not out for the season, it doesn't seem like a pup list is in order for Isaiah Likely.
Right.
Are you moving Likely's draft status and kind of his ADP at this point?
Yeah, just a bit. I moved him down a couple of spots at the tight end position, and it's just Likely. By the way, do you remember we're talking about preseason games, training camps? Do you remember Isaiah Likely's preseason and the games that he had? Dude jumped off the page. We're like, wow, this guy looks fantastic. And we see these splashes from Likely where you're like, wow, this, he could be something very different from what Mark Andrews could be. They should be running 2 tight end sets a lot. It just never has been a consistent part of the offense, and was really hoping that would evolve this year. Hasn't. And this is a setback, unfortunately, and doesn't mean it won't happen. It's a long season, and at the end of the day, we might not even remember that Likely had this surgery and missed training camp. But maybe September is just not going to be the same for Likely, unfortunately. For Flowers, John Harbaugh called this injury a camp thing. And I don't know, when I went to band camp my senior year, I picked up a camp thing from Jenny Phillips. It's so itchy, Josh. And hopefully that's not what Zay Flowers has got.
It gives a new meaning to this one time at band camp or football camp.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, legendary. It always leads into that. Where's mine going with that? Yeah.
How do you transition out of that, Josh?
You can't. My mind right goes to the American Pie 2 and just takes off, which is a legendary movie. You got me sidetracked. So the camp thing. So I'm always intrigued about this, because as soon as I listen and hear about the injuries, I already go, I shudder, because you can't hide these guys in bubble wrap until the regular season, right? It just can't happen. But it goes on conditioning and preparation, and I hate to see any likes of these injuries happen.
Yeah,
but they do happen. So you just have to tread lightly with these, and I trust the medical staff and the coaching staff to keep these guys in check. And you really hope that the Zay Flowers injury isn't too impactful. And also, even with the Ravens, when Likely and Andrews on that field, they're the best duo in tight end in football. And my mind goes to what the Patriots did years ago. And obviously we know the likes of Aaron Hernandez and what the person he was, but I'm not talking about him as the person. I'm talking about the schemes and the football player that he was. When him and Gronkowski were on the field for the Patriots back in the day, it was unstoppable. I said always those 2 tight end sets were viable. And when now the Ravens have the emergence of Isaiah Likely, which last year I kept calling him tight end 1, because I was like, Mark Andrews, who? Sorry, buddy. And, Mark has been a guest of this show. We love Mark. Mark is an ultra-talented tight end. I'm not taking away anything from him as a player or person. But Mark had a slow start, and Likely was the target for Lamar. I mean, it was Likely who was featured with the 2-point conversion and the toe tap at the start of the season.
Yeah, that was a gorgeous touchdown.
It was. It should have been, and we're all heartbroken. It wasn't. All you had to do was get those feet in bounds. And Likely just emerged, especially at the tail end of the previous year, where I remember the the fourth down conversion against the Dolphins on New Year's Eve. I remember the touchdown they caught in Jacksonville, on the primetime game. So Mark has had some good and great moments here, but he's got to step it up because he did come on late last year with 11 touchdowns still total. But I'm looking for Lamar to target him. You had him as tight end 10, but I'm looking for Lamar to really target him. And obviously Charlie Kohler is going to be filling the ranks in for that tight end 2 spot. If Likely's not a go week 1 in Buffalo, but we don't think that these 2 injuries are long term. Getting off of the injuries, let's talk about the folks in the Ravens roster who are healthy.
Yeah.
Like you said, you got to be excited for the Ravens roster, what Lamar and what this offense can do under Todd Monken. What is your fantasy outlook for the 2025 Ravens roster right now? How are you feeling?
Well, really high. And, there's almost not a lot to talk about with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson because we know exactly who they are. We know what their role is going to be. And nothing needs to change. This is a really good offense with them just doing what they do. For Derrick Henry in fantasy specifically, the only knock on him is he doesn't catch or catches little. And so for the leagues that give points for running back receptions, he drops down a bit. He's running back 7. If he had great hands, he'd be running back 1. But he doesn't. So there's every now and again, he does drop a game on us where he doesn't score the touchdown. He gets 70 yards. He doesn't catch any passes, and it's kind of a dud game. But nevertheless, Henry's special. And the reason I'm still optimistic about Henry, you mentioned his age at the outset, Josh. Henry, at the beginning of his career in Tennessee, you remember they had DeMarco Murray, and they weren't really running him that much. And so those first couple of years, he didn't have all the mileage that he would ultimately get. And he's still, a lot of carries, obviously, throughout his career. But, now at the tail end of his career, not getting all those carries early, I think does make me feel more confident that he's going to continue to be great. For Lamar Jackson, you sort of run out of superlatives for him because he's just been so good. The thing that I always remind fantasy players about Lamar, and your listeners are very tuned into the team, so they already know this, but they might not know this specific aspect. And I'll play a little trivia with you right now, Josh.
Sure, let's go.
Past 3 years, Lamar Jackson's rushing touchdowns from inside the 5-yard line over the last 3 seasons. You want to guess how many rushing touchdowns for Lamar Jackson from inside the 5?
Well, I know last year is a trick question because he literally had, I'm going to say little to none. I don't think he had any from the last 3 seasons total. I want to say he had 22.
He has, over the last 3 years, Lamar Jackson has 2 rushing touchdowns from inside the 5.
2?
2.
This is, way more generous.
Well, edit that out. Edit out the
maybe I'm thinking about his
counterpart,
Josh Allen. Because Allen's got all those touchdowns.
Right.
Wow.
So
2?
This is
2
in 3 years. They just, whether it was Greg Roman, Todd Monken, I mean, he's just not built like Josh Allen is, like Jalen Hurts is, right? Those are the guys with that low center of gravity and all the upper body strength to push a pile. That's just not who Lamar Jackson is. I mean, he helps you lots of other ways, just not there. And so the fallout of that is Derrick Henry's going to keep getting goal line touchdowns. Lamar's going to keep being great, but he's never going to be sitting on that 10, 12, 14 rushing touchdown season that you get out of Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, who get all those design push plays.
That's quite fascinating. I knew it wasn't last year because of the emergence and the addition of Derrick Henry. Why should you even do it? But now that you unpack that and make those remarks, it caused me to think about that. You're right. Lamar himself is not built for that. And thank goodness the Ravens don't run him in there and jam him in there
Right.
to cause injuries. And even look, he's a rival quarterback, and then right now it's a rival team. And with 2 playoff losses to this team and Josh Allen, Josh Allen's a rival, but you got to respect the player that he is. And he's one of the favorites to watch. But you're right. Josh Allen's built for that kind of stuff, and he doesn't shy away from contact, which if I was a Bills fan, I'd be a little concerned because I'm like, dude, you're our asset. You throw the football, everything runs through you, and you're just in there like a battering ram taking the hits. But I guess he's built for it, and the Buffalo coaching staff doesn't care about that. But thank goodness the Ravens have Henry, and of course they have some great running backs in the wings. They have Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell as a three-headed monster there for the running back. So, but you're right, Lamar does it in certain ways. Going back on his career, you got to feel the special moments in Lamar, right? The misses. The Bengals game, you can pull up highlights of him against the Bengals. He has a whole career's worth of highlights just in those games
Yeah,
with
right.
people, the spin move and making Hendricks miss and throwing on the run on the sidelines. I don't know how Lamar does it. And Paul, still talking about Lamar, the player, as an outside talent, I would love to hear your thoughts, but to me, the fan base is just divided, right? You say Lamar Jackson's so polarizing. It's side of the fan base loves him, and then the side of the fan base is critical. What do you see on the outside as far as the lens that you view the fantasy and the NFL in general? Are you seeing that, or are you seeing more of the support for Lamar? Or are you seeing a lot of the criticism out there because of the inability in the playoffs to get it done?
I don't even know what people are thinking criticizing Lamar Jackson. I mean, this is okay. We'd like him to take you to a Super Bowl. That would be great. He's a really good passer, and he's the best rushing quarterback in the NFL. I mean, any complaints here are absurd. He was last year's number one ranked Pro Football Focus passer, just on passing, not taking any of the running into account. Yeah, I don't even understand the thinking. I mean, I think if anybody who's being particularly critical of him, like the only thing you can point at is that he's not, maybe hasn't been quite as superhuman in the playoffs, but I don't get it, man. That is, there are 30 teams that would trade quarterbacks right now, and I don't even understand what anybody's doing here. Looking at Lamar Jackson through a lens of the entire NFL and the quarterbacks the teams are throwing out there. I mean, what would this if they're savaging Lamar Jackson, what would they do to Sam Darnold or Kyler Murray? I mean, I don't even understand what we're talking about right now. That is patently absurd.
There you have it. Nothing needs to be more to be said about that. You pretty much covered it there. It does baffle a lot sometimes, but look, we're critical around here because you're right. The Ravens have not got over the hump, and at this point, me and Brandon covered it on our preseason shows. We're like, pencil the Ravens in for 11, 12, 13 wins. We already know what they're going to do in regular season. Get me up playoff time. Wake me up when it's playoff time and wake me up when they make noise. And I think the frustration's there for myself. And I think I maybe speak for a good part of the fan base. It isn't the criticisms there. There are critical fans, but the criticism in total, it's as a team. It isn't just on 8 shoulders, but the team hasn't gotten it done in the playoffs, and they're just too good. And we hate to see this kind of talent wasted in the prime of Lamar Jackson's career, or they just don't win it. Now, winning, yeah, you can define it as everything in the sport, but there are Hall of Famers. A lot of skill positions that never won it, let alone got there. I mean, we always compare it. Jim Kelly got to 4 straight Super Bowls and didn't even win one. Dan Marino's illustrious career, didn't really win one as well. They're Hall of Famers in their own right, and they're the first 2 that I go to when my mind goes to, great quarterbacks who never won it. You can go to any professional sport in any ranks and find great players all over the map that are Hall of Fame worthy or are Hall of Famers in their own right and haven't sniffed the glory of winning it all.
Well,
And apparently for fans, it's
Josh,
the end all be all.
I'm a Vikings fan. I know all about having great players who never bring home the Super Bowl.
Jared
I mean,
Allen this weekend.
that's my entire
Jared
franchise's
Allen.
history.
Jared Allen, right?
Jared
He's
Allen,
being
great
inducted
example.
this weekend, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, going into the Hall of Fame this weekend and never won it. Randy Moss never won it. Chris Carter never won it. It's the list goes on. Vikings have got 20 guys in the Hall of Fame, no Super Bowls.
Yeah.
Yep. I feel you. Hey, you mentioned Justice Hill. Do you mind if I pivot this conversation to him for just a minute?
Oh, by all means, please do. Pivot away.
I thought Justice Hill dramatically improved his game last year in 2 ways. One, when his time came to be a change of pace back to Derrick Henry, he looked electric. And he looked a step faster, more elusive. I loved him as a runner, but what I really liked was the change in the receiving game. He finished last year as Pro Football Focus's 10th best receiving running back. And when you look at priority handcuffs in fantasy, Justice Hill's one of them. I think he's one of 3 or 4 guys that you go out of your way to get onto your roster two ways. One, God forbid anything happens to Derrick Henry. Now you've got the probable starter. I think Keaton Mitchell, it would not be a volume back in this offense if that happened. I think he would be the change of pace back and Hill would start. But also, it's a bye week, or something. If Derrick Henry misses one game or so, if for some reason you need to start Justice Hill, you have a chance of finding your way to 10 PPR points because he catches 4 passes for 40 yards and he runs in another 25 yards. And now you got a guy who keeps you alive. It gives you a chance to win. And so I like Justice Hill. I've ended up with him on a bunch of my early season rosters and feel like he's maybe the Raven nobody's talking about, who I think deserves a little more love from the fantasy community, a little more attention.
I'm glad you brought him up. You're right. A little chatter on that, but he is that skill position where if you look at his season last year, I had him on a couple of my teams and throw him in the flex. Helped me out tremendously. You're right. When you look, Henry is probably one of the very few backs left in this league where doesn't have the timeshare, where he's not sharing it.
Right.
He's the guy. Henry's going to be slated for 25, 30 touches a game, typically with this offense, right? And you're going to put that ball in his hands more so than not. You're not going to take it out. But when he is spelled on third down, situations or a passing situation, Justice Hill is that threat, like you alluded to earlier. Henry is not one to catch balls out of the backfield in a PPR format. Justice Hill is that guy, and it unfortunately, Justice Hill doesn't have the consistent volume to warrant you start on a weekly basis, but you're right, as a plug and play or as your roster has depth and you have injuries on your team, Justice Hill would be a great looking to for a matchup, like a situational matchup at that point where that, okay, the Ravens might have to go to a more pass-centric, or if, like you said, if, knock on wood, if Henry were to succumb to any injury this year, Justice Hill would emerge as that guy. And then, of course, keep Mitchell waiting in the wings on the back end, coming off the injury from last season's past. So, and getting another full year under his belt. So I'm looking forward to seeing, the Ravens' outlook this year in fantasy and what they can do. You already know these guys are drafted high. Lamar, Zay Flowers, Bateman. Bateman intrigues me because he's that guy he gets the target share, but he's streaky. Like, he'll have a great game fantasy-wise. Like, he had a lot of great, crazy, long touchdowns last year in some games.
Yep.
But there'll be games where it's quiet. And Zay Flowers had a few of those games last year. And the thing about it is the inconsistency. Even though the Ravens now have receivers, they're not as consistent when you look at like this is a crazy scenario, but a Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers had a way better target share overall last year than the Ravens' crop of receivers, even though Lamar had an amazing year last year, over 4,000 yards and 41 total touchdowns passing. The receivers are streaky. So what do you make of Rashard Bateman as well as the addition with DeAndre? I think DeAndre may be maybe a late round flyer, if anything, at this point.
Yeah, that's it. Just late round flyer. Bateman, it was super interesting. Played in my home state, Minnesota.
Yep.
So, tracked him very, very closely in college because he was a freaking beast as a gopher. Let me tell you, he was so good, Bateman. And it's all about knowing your format for play. Like best ball, Bateman's great. You're going to get like 6 amazing games out of the season. You won't know when they're coming. Very hard to predict. And in best ball, we don't have to sweat it. Bateman's worth a ton. In other formats, like the guillotine format, where if you have a bad game, you get chopped from the league forever. Bateman is about as highly dangerous a player as there is in the NFL because you're tempted to put him in because he's coming off a 5-catch, 130-yard, 2-touchdown performance, and it's all highlights. And you put him in your lineup, and then the next week he goes 2 catches for 18 yards and doesn't score. So it's all about knowing your format with Bateman. Good player, out bodies, good contested catch guy, out bodies defenders. There's a lot to like, but just not the week in and week out consistency. And that's, as long as you know what you're signing up for and you can apply Bateman to your format for your league, game on.
It's like you said, it's like proceed with caution kind of deal. Like you just like you know what you're getting out of the Ravens. It's like the Ravens tight ends, running back and quarterback, and that's it. It's like Zay Flowers is up there, but it's apart from that, it's the rest of it's like proceed with caution, except obviously what we mentioned is the honorable mention is you were in Justice Hill's corner where That's kind of like the Ravens' outlook in fantasy is that as much. And the Ravens' defense in a defensive format. My league settings are kind of unique. I'm a commissioner of my own league, and I beefed up the scoring where it makes the defenses viable. I don't
Mm,
do the
okay.
traditional scoring. My quarterbacks are the biggest. They're the biggest scorer on the team. Like my quarterbacks are scoring anywhere from 50 to 70 points a game because it's like they get all the yards, they get all the touchdowns. Why are they? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I've always thought as fantasy football is have fun, make it your own. And my
Yes.
league's unique. Like I get a point one for a yard. I basically get a percentage point for every yard you gain. So when a quarterback's throwing 250 yards, that's 25 points for the quarterback because I'm like reward the yardage. They're working hard.
Yeah.
So like my quarterbacks are very worth it. So like for my league itself, you could take a great quarterback early, but you can find a Drake May and still have like if he throws for 250 yards and 3 touchdowns in my league, Drake May is still viable QB1 there. So just kind of give you an insight about that and how I run things. But I wanted to ask you, Paul. So I know we can always talk Ravens, Ravens, Ravens all day, but really want to get and give a chance to speak about the NFL landscape. So this year, with just like every season, right? Every free agent season brings a whole fresh look and perspective with a lot of movement, faces in new places. Sometimes, even with this year, head coaches coming out of the woodwork and coming out now. Pete Carroll is in Las Vegas now coaching the Raiders of all teams. So wanted to get your thoughts on the landscape with all the free agents that landed everywhere and all the crop of rookies. What is your outlook on the 2025 fantasy season as we embark now? We're in August, where we're right in the midst of getting prepared for drafts here coming up.
Yeah, well, I mean, super broad question. This is a year where I think the rookie class is going to make or break a lot of fantasy drafts. It was such a deep running back class, especially that you're going to have some opportunities to get rookie running back talent that have the huge possible variation, Josh, in outcomes. Where Ashton Genty could lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns and rushing yards this year. That is a possible thing that could happen. So could Amarian Hampton if things break right. It's such a deep class that you're going to have a chance to take some stabs at rookies that not quarterbacks. It's a terrible rookie quarterback draft from a fantasy standpoint. Cam Ward might turn out to be a okay NFL player, but I don't think he's going to be a fantasy factor. But you're going to have some chance to take stabs at rookies, and I've really started prioritizing which rookies I'm going for when, and I don't want a whole roster of them, but I want to take my shots on some guys that I think have an opportunity to have an impact and especially have an impact early.
You did mention it is a running back heavy draft this year. You mentioned a name, and the name's going to come up a lot this year. Ashton Genty, coming out of Boise State, the dude was a beast, monster.
Mm-hmm.
Loved watching all of his highlights. He had some crazy games last year where in the past couple seasons where he was amassing crazy stats. What he had games of like 4 or 6 touchdowns in one game.
I know.
I'm excited to see what he can do. Especially, I think the X factor is Pete Carroll. If I remember correctly, when he had beast mode, Marshawn
Oh
Lynch,
yeah.
Pete Carroll runs a run heavy offense. So, and with him tandem with Brock Bowers, and Brock Bowers is hailed this year as a close tight end one. Like he's
Yes.
drafted like top two, top three tight.
Yep.
He's in one, two, or three top tight end in these mock drafts going forward. I can't wait to see what this offense looks like with Brock Bowers having the year that he had in his rookie year last year. He's coming in year two. The question is the quarterback position in Las Vegas, but I think Ashton Genty easily. I agree with you. I think he easily leads. He could lead the league in rushing touchdowns, but certainly I circle him for rookie of the year right now, easily,
Yeah, he's the
without him
he's
getting
and
hurt
certainly the
easily.
betting line favorite. I mean, the Vegas
Oh
odds
yeah.
are so heavily tilted towards Ashton Genty. He's almost unbettable right now. It's I'm less worried about Geno Smith than a lot of other people are. Geno is just a super efficient quarterback. The Raiders, they've been going to war with such terrible quarterbacks. Aiden O'Connell, guys that just killed their drives. Geno Smith threw for the fourth most yards last year. I mean, this is a guy, and he's not going to kill drives. He's going to get the ball to his players, You mentioned Jacoby Myers earlier. Really good under the radar player. Brock Bowers, we know if he's 10 or 20% better as a sophomore than he was as a rookie, that's going to be huge. And then Ashton Genty, you know that they're gonna work that kid early. And so there are few NFL runners that are as rookie runners that are as NFL ready as Ashton Genty is to make an immediate impact. He's all the way up as my 5th overall player, my 3rd running back off the board is Ashton Genty, and really excited about what he can do. Raiders offense, Josh, should be one of the 5 most improved offenses this year, which isn't saying a lot because they ranked 28th in points last year. So,
they couldn't score.
Couldn't score. Yep, it'll get a lot better this year.
Absolutely. And speaking of player who couldn't score, Trey McBride, man, all the catches, all the yards in the world, but I'm like, just give me that touchdown. Just couldn't get in the end zone. I think it was that one game where he finally got in. It felt like the weight was lifted. I was like, it's something to celebrate because I was like, I'm not dropping him. I have faith, but I'm like, can you just score for the Cardinals? But I'm hearing that Marvin Harrison Jr. is having a good preseason in camp right now for the Cardinals, and looking to see how that offense evolves. It seems like these West Coast teams intrigue me more, right? It's all about, Ravens here on the East Coast and Bills and, the heavyweights of the AFC and obviously the Chiefs in the Midwest. But, I feel like these West Coast teams, man, they got the players and they got the schemes. And I'm looking forward to loading up with these guys on my fantasy roster. Sticking on the rookie train here, I want to ask you about a name, because this is going to be intriguing. In Big D by Jaden Blue.
Okay.
The Dallas running back scene is an enigma, in my opinion, because it's just kind of like last year you just couldn't get a handle on it. It seems like forever in my book they haven't had a viable running back since, I feel like, Emmitt Smith. I mean, Marion Barber was my guy. It
feels like it's been that long,
yeah. Marion Barber was my fantasy guy back in the day. I loved the guy.
Another gopher. All right.
Yes.
Yeah. Outstanding. Yes. Oh, he was so good. And so was his father as a gopher in the way before our time, like in the 70s. His father was a great gopher too.
See, the Minnesota bloodline, man.
Let's talk Jaden Blue.
What do you think?
At the outset of camp, 2 weeks ago, one of the Cowboys coaches used the phrase borderline lazy to describe Jaden Blue. And because we got nothing else to go on 2 weeks ago, this before training camps had really kicked in, his ADP went way down. Jaden Blue's, he dropped 2 rounds of ADP. But since then, it's all the opposite. And maybe that was just to light a little fire under Jaden Blue, let him know that what he was doing was not working. But since then, it's all been positive, including yesterday. Brian Schottenheimer said, quote, he's impressed with Blue's speed, his dynamic play, his professionalism that he's shown at camp. And he's not getting first team reps yet, but he's the only Dallas runner with an iota of explosiveness. Javonte Williams brings nothing. Miles Sanders brings nothing. So, I see Jaden Blue getting third down work pretty early in the season, and maybe that expands over the course of the season, Josh.
Oh, I love it. Something to keep in mind for the late round flyers in the draft, especially my keeper league. I'm in all kinds of formats, and I'm in I'm a fantasy crazy guy. I can't say no to leagues. Everybody's like, oh, I got an extra spot. I cap it at I'm going to be in 6 and end up in 12 leagues every year. I don't know how I do it. But I'm looking to circle him for the late rounds, in the mid to late rounds, for my keeper league, because I think he's going to be emerging as the guy. I think he's the guy I believe that could be the RB1 in Dallas. And Dallas intrigues me because they have the addition of George Pickens. I always love a CeeDee Lamb share on my teams. Last year I had the stack of Dak and CD, and of course Dak got hurt. I'm interested to see Dallas as a team that intrigues me as well as fantasy. Is what are they going to do? Because they're just pass heavy, and it all falls on Dak's shoulders. And if Dak can stop, number one, stay healthy, but stop throwing interceptions, that would be great. But I'm looking to see what that experiment looks like for George Pickens in Dallas, for sure.
And we should mention, since this is the Caw, this is a Ravens related podcast primarily. Cooper Rush was not awful last year. I mean, he had some moments where he looked like a functional NFL quarterback, And, we've seen Lamar misses a couple of games a year often. And in the past, the drop off has been pretty severe. I feel like this team can cobble together a couple of wins if they need to with Cooper Rush.
I'm glad you said that because for me, I was really baffled by that addition because, and think about the landscape of how the Ravens run their offense, right? And the backups that they've employed in recent memory. There's a reason why they paid RG3 the money to sit on the bench. There's the reason why they held on to Tyler Huntley for so long until they couldn't. Josh Johnson. They have a
Yeah.
certain prototype at quarterback, and
That's not
to have
Cooper
a Cooper
Rush's type.
Rush, I just
Nope.
don't understand. Like, look, I'm hearing you when you say and you're in his corner, but I just don't understand it from a schematic perspective. That's what I mean.
Well, yeah, and
I don't
what you're
get it.
saying makes total sense. I think what they've decided after going to war with the Huntleys of the world is, at the end of the day, we need a guy who can pass. I need somebody who can complete 25 passes in a game, and that's and stylistically it's going to be different, but we're going to have a quarterback who can actually deliver a catchable pass. And
Ooh.
so that's where I think this is sort of the experiment with the poor man's Lamar Jackson as your backup has just left you poor and hasn't given you the advantages of an athletic quarterback as a backup that you'd want to have, because the passing just hasn't been requisite of at the NFL level.
Ooh. So more of a game manager. Just go in and just manage it.
Don't lose games. Just get your
Yeah.
quarterback in the spot where he's not going to lose the games for you, and go let Derrick Henry and this what should be much improved defense. I mean, your draft was, I don't know, what was it, like 2/3 defensive players, including your
Yeah.
first round, your second round, your fourth round, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, let's go get a quarterback who isn't going to single handedly lose us games.
Absolutely. And it seems like they got the guy. I can kind of level with you there, but I'm still sitting here baffled. But we'll see. Let's hope the
We
Rush
don't have to agree.
experiment.
That's okay, Josh.
Yeah, no, we don't have to agree on everything. It's okay. Yeah, I was just again when I saw that news a few months ago, I was kind of like, What are you doing, Ravens?" But real quick, I want to ask you for the rookies. I have to ask here, Travis
Yeah,
Hunter.
yeah,
What are your thoughts?
love it. I mean, if
Okay,
you said something really important earlier, Josh. Fantasy football is supposed to be fun. Who's more fun to draft this year than Travis Hunter? What a blast to have him on your team. What he's going to do on offense, what he could do on defense. And even if you don't get points for interceptions and sacks, or, whatever, not that he's getting a lot of sacks, but interceptions, don't care. You know what you probably do get points for? Pick sixes. Travis Hunter could be sitting on a couple of those. He is going to be so good after the pick that I expect him to score a couple of touchdowns on defense, and he's just going to be so much fun. So I'm targeting him. Let me tell you, I'll tell you exactly where I've got him in my rankings. He is currently going off the board, player 85 in my
oh,
rankings, which are available at fantasylife.com, by the way. And I just think, at the end of the day, if you're with me that fantasy football should be fun, Travis Hunter is going to be your guy. He's going to start right away. And what a great tandem, I should mention, with Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas, you get this big bodied beast who's going to win every contested catch. Really, really tough to man up against in intermediate passing ranges. And then there's going to be Travis Hunter, who's just going to blow by guys and get open downfield, going to open up the rest of the field for Brian Thomas. Jacksonville, also a team that's going to be vastly improved on offense. Really excited for Travis Hunter.
they're my pick to win the South for sure.
I like it. Mine too.
I like it too. Yeah, I'm very excited. Brian Thomas Jr. was my guy last year. Couldn't get enough of the guy, and I'm really hoping. And I felt like even still, Trevor Lawrence took a step back last year. I wanted more Trevor Lawrence,
Oh,
and I was
yeah.
like, "What are you doing, Trev? Like, what are you doing? You got the receivers. Now he's got another addition on a star receiver." I agree with you. I think Jacksonville certainly is the team that improves out of there, and I think they certainly I feel like are the favorites to win that division. One
And
last
Josh,
remark.
let's just one more thing
No,
quickly.
sure, go ahead.
Look what Liam Cohen did with Baker Mayfield. If
Right.
he can do 75% of what he did to Baker Mayfield to Trevor Lawrence to turn around his career, then Trevor Lawrence is a candidate for comeback player of the year.
Ooh,
Or I think,
love it.
I don't know. Yeah, because he missed a bunch of time last year. So yeah, there's a scenario here.
There is a very good scenario there, and I think he's going to come back with a vengeance. And that offense, Baker's had a resurgence of his career like none other. I mean, it helps when you have Mike Evans, right? But um,
Yep.
Baker, he's not the same Baker that played in the AFC North. I'll tell you that.
No,
Not the same
no.
Baker for sure.
Yeah, right. You got the version. Ravens got to play the version of Baker that you wanted to face.
Yes, they were
Yes.
the early on arrogant, fiery rookie who come out and
Yes.
was trying to something to prove and had chip on his shoulder for whatever reason. So, speaking of quarterbacks, wanted to ask you. We talked about this wasn't a draft class for quarterbacks this year. It seems like Tennessee hasn't gotten it right and won't get it right. They got Cam Ward in the quarterback position. I have Miami. Really, is it boom or bust here? What are you calling here? You think boom? Are you calling bust here as a quarterback? What do you think?
For Cam Ward, I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be a serviceable NFL quarterback. I don't see special traits, but I see somebody who is not going to deliver 4 interceptions a game like Will Levis had the potential of doing. You're going to see far fewer errant passes. You're going to see much more of a game manager. Will he pepper Calvin Ridley with targets? I think one of the most fascinating parts of this. Ridley's game was awful at last year through the first half of the season. And then they really changed his route structure halfway through the season. And Ridley was a different guy in the second half of the year. And from what they've learned there, I do believe that the Titans have got a recipe to help put Calvin Ridley in a spot where he can get open and he can be effective after the catch. Now we just got to get Cam Ward through, like this first month of the season where he's like most rookie quarterbacks. He's going to take his lumps. Bo Nix last year was dreadful for the first month of the season, and then he was pretty damn good after that. So the question is, to me, I think Calvin Ridley's going to have some value. Not a lot of other Titans are going to have a ton of value, but Calvin Ridley will, and Cam Ward's just going to do enough to get him the ball. And most of the rest of the Titans, I'm avoiding on my fantasy teams.
I mean, I agree with you last year because I had Ridley and I lived and died by that. It seemed like every time I started him, it was miss,
Yeah,
and
right?
then I would
Yeah.
put him out of the lineup, and then he hit, and I'm like, dude, come on. But they did have addition this year. Tyler Lockett is a new face for that offense. Brings a veteran presence to Tennessee from Seattle. Um, I'm looking for Tyler Lockett to do always what he continues to do. A very good receiver, solid, reliable, and I think that's a name to circle and watch out for a new face in a new place in 2025 for sure. Um, Another names that comes to mind is I think the Cooper Cup experiment in Seattle is going to be fun to watch. I think with Sam Darnold there, um, it's going to be interesting for sure. And then speaking of Sam Darnold, which is the former of the Vikings, you now get the J.J. McCarthy experiment. I want to really
Yeah.
key in on that. What are your thoughts now? You finally get to see. A lot of folks are forgetting about J.J. McCarthy's existence because he wasn't around last year. He was hurt. Um, what are your expectations? First off, I know you're probably excited. And second, as far as a fantasy perspective, where are you looking at him as far as late round drafts?
I love JJ as your second quarterback on your fantasy team. Where this is going to be, first of all, he's looked good in camp. There are some people that think that he doesn't have an NFL level arm. They're crazy. He's got a downfield arm, and he has by and large looked good in camp to this point. JJ McCarthy is dropping into arguably the best spot for any first year starting quarterback in the history of the league, Josh. Look at what he's got around him. Justin Jefferson on a Hall of Fame pace, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. He can dump the ball out of the backfield to Aaron Jones. Vikings offensive line got really beat up last year at the end of the season, especially. So what do? First round pick at left guard. Then they got one of the most established veteran presence at the center position in Ryan Kelly from the Colts. And then they got what most people believe was the best guard in free agency in Will Fries to play right guard. So they improved left guard, center, right guard. So the offensive line should be much better. And they already had great tackles, two of the 15 best tackles in the league. Offensive line should be a lot better. But most importantly, Kevin O'Connell, the coach. This is arguably the best quarterback coach in the NFL. Put obviously Kirk Cousins on the best years of his career. Got milked functional play out of guys like Nick Mullins when they had to after Kirk went down with the Achilles injury. Josh Dobbs was functional. And then last year, look what he did with Sam Darnold. Turned Sam Darnold's entire career around in one season. I don't think any quarterback, first year quarterback, has been dropped into as much of a promising spot as this. And I'll also mention this: JJ can run a little. Kevin O'Connell has never run his quarterbacks, but he's also never had mobile quarterbacks. This kid's gonna, it's mostly about the passing, but he's gonna chip in a little bit like Drake May, I think, last year, where he surprised us with his rushing ability.
Yeah,
There's
for
gonna
sure.
be more running opportunities for McCarthy than I think people realize. And he's going to be, from a dynasty standpoint, really, really excited for him and what the future holds. But even for this year, I think he's a great second quarterback on your fantasy team, JJ McCarthy.
I like it. Also looking for the JJ to JJ connection, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, baby.
Um,
Yeah.
where I'm seeing Justin Jefferson fall a little bit in mocks early on this summer.
Hmm.
So far, maybe it's alluding to maybe the quarterback position, right? The uncertainty because McCarthy is a true rookie right now. I guess that's the problem. We don't know what we're getting with
Yeah.
him. But it's like you got to trust Justin Jefferson. He's the one of the top elite receivers in the league. I don't care if you have a rookie or an NFL veteran or a Hall of Famer thrown to him. It's Justin freaking Jefferson, and you're going to get
Right.
fed the ball, and he's going to make plays for you. Just no different than Jamar Chase in our division. I don't care if Burrow or not throwing the football. It's still Jamar Chase, and he's still dangerous. So
Right.
I'm
Right.
seeing Jefferson fall to late first, early second, where it was maybe a season or two ago. I was seeing Jefferson as the second receiver taken off the board right behind Jamar Chase. Like it was like
Yeah. Or
instantaneously
first.
in PPR
Yeah.
format. Like, got to go get him.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing any drafts where he's going that far, but I am seeing
Yeah,
him drop a pick or two, down to pick like 4 or 5. I am more commonly seeing that. And he does have a hamstring injury right now, and I think it's a reflection of that, Josh. And but big deal. I mean, Kevin O'Connell's super transparent about almost everything, and he said that week one is not in any danger whatsoever, and Jefferson's probably only going to miss a week or two, and so
good.
I'm not holding that against him. Now, what we will see is a more balanced Vikings offense with more running. Jordan Mason's one of my favorite sleepers of the entire out of all 32 teams. We're going to see a lower passing percentage from Kevin O'Connell this year as he tries to ask JJ McCarthy to just be efficient, and that might affect Justin Jefferson a little bit. I could see him sitting on fewer receptions and targets than he's had the past couple of years, but he'll still be super efficient with what he's got, and he's absolutely still, to me, a no. I wouldn't let Justin Jefferson slide farther than about pick 6, 7. I mean, CeeDee
Right.
Lamb's got way more negatives around him to me than
For
Justin
sure.
Jefferson does.
And for me, I'm not letting him slide out of the first round. I've only done. I'll ramp up my personal mocks here in a couple weeks. My drafts are starting here in about 3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
But the few mocks that I was a part of, it was a mystery. I was kind of like, why is Jefferson going like 11 or 12 in these full PPR mock drafts? Again, I don't know if it was just people just early on and they were just passing on him, but I just noticed the trend. I was like, hopefully that won't continue. But I did make a note of it. Like he was going like 10th overall, like 9th, 10th, 11th. And I was like, what's up with this? Maybe people are just mocking him, scared of the quarterback. I don't know. But it was something to make note, but let's hope that don't continue.
Yep.
But hey, if it's in my league, if I'm in the middle of the league, he's not getting around. If he's there, I'm taking him all the way. Um, we cannot get out of here without me asking you about the landscape of the AFC North. In staying in the division, first comes to mind the Pittsburgh Steelers and what
Hmm.
they got going on there. They brought in DK Metcalf. They brought in the experiment, which is the one Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I just laugh because I can't wait to see how this unfolds. Um, because look, like Aaron Rodgers
Uh,
is who he is. Look, he was one. He's still in one of my favorite players to watch. I drafted him on a lot of my fantasy teams over the years. But the problem is, and we spoke about it when we were special guest on some of the Steelers podcasting, is we don't know what Aaron Rodgers you might get, and if you go off the what you've seen lately, the Jets experiment was atrocious coming off the injury. And then last year, I know he had a bad offensive line, couldn't protect, but it was horrible. And as a Steelers fan, you go from a Russell Wilson to now a older and basically right on his last leg Aaron Rodgers. What do you
Yeah.
take of the landscape that is the Pittsburgh Steelers offense right now?
Um, Lukewarm at best. Rodgers was not awful last year, in my opinion, and they threw constantly. I think this would be a more balanced attack, particularly because we know that Arthur Smith wants to run and run a lot. I'm interested in Caleb Johnson, their rookie running back. He was the whole offense at Iowa. They had no functional passing game. Everybody knew Caleb Johnson was going to be sitting on 25 carries a game, and defenses still couldn't stop him. That kid he's really good. I believe he's going to walk into the no less than an even timeshare with Jaylen Warren, and he's going to get the goal line work. Jaylen Warren's just not a goal line guy. Caleb Johnson is a big-bodied, low center of gravity, power back, running between the tackles. So Caleb Johnson, to me, could be sitting on 10 touchdowns, something Najee Harris never hit. And I just think he's a better inside runner and probably just a better pure runner anyway. So I'm excited for him. The rest of this offense, Rodgers throwing to Metcalf, and when it's not Metcalf, who's it to? Are we going to Roman Wilson? Are we going to Scotty Miller? Robert Woods' primary attribute is losing starting jobs. Jonnu Smith is really interesting. Pat Fryermuth, they're going to have to try to find ways to get their tight ends on the field because they just don't have enough good playmakers on this offense. If they're smart, they're going to find ways to get Jonnu Smith the ball constantly, but I don't trust Arthur Smith to do anything smart, Josh.
There you go. There you have it. Speaking of not smart, I don't know what the Browns are doing at quarterback position. They won Watson all that money. They're moving on. They got Flacco still. They should have stuck with him from the get go, I believe, and he's still got something left in the tank to prove. Man, Joe's had a career, but they took a flyer on Shadur Sanders. Quarterback position in Cleveland's a very intriguing one because I feel it's going to be Flacco by default, but who knows? I don't know what they're going to do. It's Cleveland. Cleveland's always going to Cleveland around here. Hard to make of it, and I'm sad to see Nick Chubb move on because Nick Chubb for me was a fantasy player that I circled all the time, and it was sad to see him get hurt for the second time because Nick Chubb just you were getting a workhorse with that running back, and now he's not there. It's going to be intriguing to see how the Cleveland offense suffers because of that.
Yep, and Chubb's one of the guys I'm targeting now in Houston with the injury that Joe Mixon has got. Chubb looks like your starter, and I think they're another year off of the ACL. He could be a more dynamic back, and I think he's gonna win that job in week 1, and maybe he holds it for a long time. Mixon really ran out of gas last year. The second half of the season, he was a shell of his former self, and wasn't getting a lot of help behind a bad Houston offensive line, particularly as a run blocking unit. And that didn't help, and the offensive line didn't get a lot better. But back to the Browns. The winner in this quarterback competition, and they're holding right now 5 quarterbacks. The winner in the Browns quarterback competition, Josh, is humanity when Deshaun Watson never sees a football field again. That's your real winner. But the best storyline that I would love to see is Shadur Sanders winning this thing. He's had flashes where he's looked pretty good in this training camp. If he can beat out Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, and he beats out Dylan Gabriel himself, taken 2 rounds before Shadur Sanders, I mean, at that point, Sanders will have also beaten out, by the way, all of those glum Cleveland executives who couldn't muster a smile when they selected him in the draft. Do you remember that when we're watching the draft and Shadur Sanders finally goes and they cut to the Browns war room and they're like, man, Shadur Sanders, a chance to really stick it to everybody. And that would be a great, great, fun time to watch if it works out that way.
Actually would. The largest chip on anybody's shoulder this year probably resides on him. I can't wait to see because it was all about him and watching the draft coverage. His name kept coming up and where does he get drafted? What team's going to do it? And I even said it right before the Browns did it. I was like, Ravens, why not?
Why not?
Like,
I think everybody's fan base eventually is like, why not? Right. Who cares if we got a quarterback? Let's see what happens.
His father years before, so for a stint. Mm-hmm. So I would say, why not be a backup to Lamar? And then the Browns got him, so I said somebody did. Obviously, the other counterpart in the AFC North, Cincinnati Bengals. Um, Lamar and the Ravens have had their number recently. Lamar has dropped maybe
Mhm.
one or two games here in the last 10. It seems like they just know how to play the Bengals. Bengals last year, those two games with the Ravens, Bengals, um, phenomenal. Like I told you, there's highlight
Yeah.
reels all over the place. Jamar Chase had career games, not only for real but fantasy implications. And the Ravens still came up victorious. But Jamar Chase just kills the Ravens. The Ravens beefed up their secondary this year with the likes of Malachi Starks.
Yep.
Now adding Jair Alexander, Kyle Hamilton's a top-rated safety. You have Marlon Humphrey back there. They have depth at the secondary position. So they re-signed T. Higgins. They got Joe Burrow. It's an air assault in Cincinnati for this team. I expect more of the same coming out of Cincinnati for this Bengals squad.
Yeah, it's the one thing I'll mention, Chase Brown could be sitting on a really good season. We know he's going to get the overwhelming majority of the carries. They just cut Zach Moss outright.
Yep.
That only leaves Samaje Perine and rookie Taj Brooks, the 6th rounder, behind Chase Brown. Chase Brown could be looking at 300 touches. We saw his reception load go up over the course of the season, and it starts to look really comfortable on him. Chase, if there's somebody, if you had to say, like, pick somebody not going in the first 2 rounds that could end up being a top 5 running back, Chase Brown would be my guy. He is, there's a really, really good offense that's going to score a ton of points, and he's the undisputed number 1, and people aren't acting like it. I'm a big fan of this kid. I just visually, I love what I saw from him. Right now, I've got him at pick 18
Okay.
overall. That's quite a bit higher than most people have got him going. I'd take him
Wow.
ahead of other running backs like Jonathan Taylor, who doesn't really catch. Josh Jacobs doesn't catch a lot. I think Chase Brown is potentially sitting on a really nice year, and he's a little bit overlooked in an offense that we know can pass really effectively. I think Chase Brown's potentially sitting on a great year. Really excited for him.
I love it. Yeah, he's one of those names that it's not out there often, but you're right with that offensive team that they have, and if you're one to be in that 4 half point PPR format, catching passes out of backfield, and when Joe Burrow's your quarterback, and you're the benefactor of leaving some of the receiver help there, they got great receivers, so you're next in line to get some receptions. I think Chase Brown certainly fits the bill. I'm intrigued to see how high you had him. I probably would have drafted him a little bit lower, and
Yeah,
I
most
guess it
would.
depends on how. Yeah, and it depends on how drafts go. You're always surprised at the human factor. You can do mocks all day, but then I had somebody one last year. Actually, it was 2 years ago. They selected Lamar first overall, and they weren't kidding. And I was like, okay, then, like, let's go.
All
Like,
right.
you just
Yeah,
get that
right.
shocker where you're like, it just changes everything, and it changes your ADP and draft board, and you kind of have to scramble. So I'm interested to see, how many shares of Chase Brown I can end up with this year, and looking forward to a solid year in that regard. Before we get out of here, I don't want to miss this with you. So, obviously, I personally dub you as the guillotine guru. I know we talked on X a couple seasons ago. I think it was last year. I was looking to get involved in the guillotine leagues. The guillotine league format. It's something that I recently start seeing coming up, and it's been an uptick in trending. Where I was kind of like, "What is this about?" I listened to fantasy podcasts and fantasy. I live breathe it all season. Where it's just in my
Love it.
ears. I'm getting feedback. I'm getting expert advice from all across channels. And when I was searching guillotine leagues, obviously the likes of you came up. Your name was closely tied to that. If you check your profile on X, your background photo is even the guillotine. So I love it. So
Right.
I wanted to
Right.
really unpack that because me as commissioner, I put it out for my guys this year to kind of do it on the side and see the
Yeah,
gainer.
as a second league. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I garnered half the league. I'm in the 12. I got 12 guys in my league, including myself, and half the league responded saying I would try it out for the guillotine structure. So,
That's great.
yeah, so I want to unpack that for folks who are brand new to it, including myself. Let's dive in. Explain a little bit about the guillotine league format. What should we look out for? And just looking to get like starter help. Like if you're looking to get
Yeah.
involved in your guillotine league, how's it go?
So first, here's how here you can play with as many teams as you want. Ideally, you get 18 because there's 18 weeks in the season, but you can play with less if you'd like. Every week, there's no head-to-head matchups. Every week, the low scoring team gets chopped from the league forever, and their players go to the waiver wire, where the rest of us get to bid on those players and start building superstar rosters. So all you need to do is not finish last in any week. And that really changes around your draft strategy, Josh. You mean now I'm looking for consistent players who aren't going to get me dud games. You mentioned Rashad Bateman. You know, he is great game,
Yeah.
terrible game. That's the opposite of what we want in our roster for Guillotine. We want guys that are going to deliver us like 10 PPR points every single week. Zay Flowers is going to be, he's going to be way better than Bateman would be, just to keep it on Ravens for a second. We want consistent players that aren't going to give you duds, because you get like 3 dud guys in the same week, and next thing you know, you're the one chopped. So you get to change strategies a little bit in terms of drafting, but you also get all of the decision making about what to do when a great team's roster gets cut. And here comes on the waiver wire, let's just say a team gets cut that had Bijan Robinson, had Brian Thomas, had Garrett Wilson, had Jackson Smith and Jigba, DeAndre Swift. You're like, okay, I got $1,000 of play money to work with for the entire season. Here's Bijan Robinson. Do I push in a bunch of chips now and after week 1 and just figure I can start Bijan Robinson the rest of the year? Or do I save it because next week it's going to be, like CeeDee Lamb and Bucky Irving and T. Higgins. And, there's going to be a bunch of great players next week too. So when do you go all in? How much money you spend? How to fortify your roster? It is fascinating. Guillotine Leagues, tons of fun, and a really different way to play season long.
Wow. I can already imagine the fun that this is going to be. When I heard it, it's kind of the hybrid of like, it's basically Survivor. It's basically like head-to-head matchups. Just don't be the lowest scorer that guy that week. But what intrigues me is the twist, and it's not like your typical waiver wire or snake drafts. It's pretty much run how the auction leagues are run. Like, you get the bid on the players and you have money and there's budgeting involved. Because I introduced this to one of my friends and he was kind of like, he wasn't embarrassed to say it, but he was kind of like, I don't know, man, because the whole budgeting and the money thing has got me like stressed out. Because he's like, how do you know what you're going to spend? And I'm like, well, that's the beauty of it. Like, and I'm sure there's a lot of expert advice out there, including from yourself, on how to manage that, how to budget. But you're right. The beauty of it is budgeting, but the intriguing part is the twist. Don't finish last. The teams get cut, but the players get put back into the free agent pool, where essentially, to the point of it, you can have 2 super rosters going head to head for the actual title, which is insane. So
it is.
Yeah. And that's what intrigues me. And I feel like the way they could be run, like if you don't get enough folks, right? Like if, let's say you get 6 teams, okay, you're in it for 6 weeks. I guess, I don't know how these work, but can you start them again mid-season, where if you only have them for a few weeks, you can start another one back up?
So Josh, you mentioned half your league's in, so you got 6 players right now. Yeah. You could run a 6-week Guillotine League. Redraft. You'll have a champion. Whoever's the last team standing after 6 weeks wins, and then redraft. Start again. And you can even sneak in 3 seasons if you wanted to. So you could actually do that 3 times if you wanted to. Now, or you could, Josh. Now, I don't know if you got a lot of friends. I mean, it seems like you might be a guy who struggles to make friends, so you might not be able to get more than 6. But you could also just throw it out there and see if you could fill your league and get more players. Or you could just, reset it and have 3 different champions in one NFL season.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of customizations. I don't think I would be hard pressed to get guys. And I don't think an excuse, but what's a valid thing is, I throw it out to a lot of people, and people are always like I'm in 3 or 4 or 5 leagues already, man, and I don't want to add another one. Me, I can't get enough. It comes around once a year, and it is hard to manage. It is like a full-time job when you're managing, 8, 9 different rosters, but I just can't get enough. And for me, I just do it. It's the love of the game. And for me, personally, Paul, it's a bonding thing for me and my dad. My dad made love football, love sports, love the Baltimore Ravens, love the Orioles. But me and my dad, when we get on the phone and talk draft strategy and like players to pick up and who should I start this week, and we're looking at rosters and we give each other advice and we're feeding off each other. And until when it's rivalry week and we got to play each other head to head, then all bets are off. I'm like, no help, you're on your
Yeah,
own.
that's right. Yes,
It's, to me, that's a great bonding thing for me and my father, man. It's
I love it.
I love, the art. I'm glad he's into it. I'm glad that we have something to bond over. We bond over a lot, but fantasy football is one of those things to where, when we're not watching the Ravens and we're watching the Sunday night, Monday night games, and it comes down to those matchups and we're rooting for our players. I can't tell you the times I want to video the reactions when we're rooting for a certain guy on my dad's roster to win a
Aw.
matchup and this guy hits it or hits the touchdown and he's all, you would think we're watching a Ravens game, man. He's all into it and yelling at the TV and excited. So, and I'm sure that happens not only for us, but guys everywhere and even gals. There's a lot of girls that I know that play fantasy football and they're pretty good at it. So, not one to exclude because, they know their stuff. And, but it's all about drafting. The drafting season's fun, whether you're live or online. I can't get enough of fantasy, and I'm sure you guys can't too. But wanted to thank you again, Paul, for your time today. We can talk all day, probably football, fantasy, and then some. But before we get out of here, I want to give you the floor and give you an opportunity to plug in yourself, your socials, and where people can find you, and then a little bit about fantasy life.
GuillotineLeagues.com. If you want to learn more about Guillotine Leagues and you want to join a league, we have free leagues. So if you're just like, hey, I just want to stick my toe in the water and I don't want to put any money on the line, we have free leagues. We've got paid leagues. You can run a private league with your friends. GuillotineLeagues.com. And yeah, it's pretty much perfect spot to give it a try and see if it's right for you and if it's as much fun as it sounds.
Awesome, Paul. Well, thank you again. We hope to have in the show later in the season. I would love to do this with you again. And if I get the Guillotine League started through GuillotineLeagues.com, I can't wait to give you some feedback on how the first experience was. I'm looking forward to it.
Love it. Thanks, Josh. Tons of fun.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. All right, great. This